Hi, I want to talk about the aftermath when centralized societies or economies they die, and they have all these branches and hierarchies everywhere, and they become like a decomposing corpse. Sometimes, for example, a whale dies and washes ashore, and this is one of the main sources of food for Eskimos. Is the whole Eskimo tribe discovers this whale that has died. Well, a whale is a huge animal, and it has all kinds of goodies inside. The meat, the bones, everything is going to get used up. The whole tribe chops it up and uses it from anything from cooking oil to food to the bones. They can use it for making their homes, and this repeats in many places, in many kinds of situations. Well, I live in Orange County, and here the society was quite different in the 50s and 60s. And I could see the corpses of many corporations and many forms of economics. One of the most pronounced entity that I can see is this huge mall that's right around the corner here, and the mall has really died. There's hardly any stores, and the stores that have remained, they are very marginal kind of business, and some small jewelry stores. I think they still had the theater, but I haven't checked in the last year or two. I used to go, and there was a theater inside, but then back then the economies were very centralized. And there was the wealthy Orange County residents, and there were a lot of retail shops, very upscale retail shop, and also they cater to young and with a lot of disposable income. But then retailing is totally out of fashion. Nowadays, many kids, including myself, I buy so much online off of eBay. You will not believe. Sometimes as much as 400 a month. Well, that might sound like a small amount of money, but other people, they probably spend a lot more. And I buy just about everything, including clothes, because as a guy, I could just give them. I bought pants, and I know the size is usually 35, 36 by 31, 32, even 30 will do, and the lengths, and bingo. Usually a black or blue dress shirt. It's like the whole industry completely died, and even when everything was going well, there were the Macy's and the Sears. I was very intimidated by their retail environment, because I was shopping and with other customers, and these other customers, they had a lot of money, and when the retail shop, they didn't really need to cater to me in any shape and form. In fact, I was like one of the least favorite customers, and they would price things and present them to get the real customers, which were usually white, upper class, or something like that. And also the jobs were also offered to these same characters. So when the whole industry died, it left behind all these infrastructures, all these buildings, and the money that was coming in and was then getting funneled or distributed or concentrated, or use the local banks and the local infrastructure. So when the money wasn't coming in anymore, and those other institutions that were subsidiary or the part of a hierarchy, economic hierarchy, they also start to wither and die away. I think this same effect is happening with many like office buildings and many like strip malls. Well, with the office building, back then in the 50s, for example, there was no internet, there was no email, and usually had to send stuff through the snail mail to communicate, and people had to sometimes take, for example, the attorneys had to take their court documents or hire courier to take it physically from place to place. Well, these days, many courts they are hooked up together on a website. You can not only fill out the forms, but also file them and pay for them online too. Well, all of these functions that have been condensed and been made into electronic form, they're all a separate function, and there was a company or there was an office location that did that, or there was a clerk or a nice lady that they would fill out the form for you. You would have to pay her. So these were all locations, monies, employments that they kind of withered and died because technologically other technologies came in and kind of outmoded those things. So what we have here in one of the wealthiest counties in the United States is that you have all these infrastructures, all these companies, all these buildings that were made in the 50s and 60s. They are like the shells of successful companies that lived and then they died, and now we are. Yeah. So, but this doesn't end there. Many of these companies, they had a mirror image in their politics. So the politics of the cities that are all in Orange County, they remained from back then, and they have all these laws and regulations that supposedly governs the very wealthy upper middle class that we were back then, and now all these laws and all these infrastructure, all these legal procedures, mannerisms, they remain. They're like really bad jewelry that's hanging on your neck from very long time ago. But it's not so simple to get rid of them. But then on what remained and what prospered and is still here and will keep going would be there were a lot of wealthy upper middle class, and they liked drugs, and so those industries, meth and pot and heroin, and they all remain, and the people, even though they don't have good jobs anymore, they're still practicing that. So everything is just like living in a graveyard with many dinosaur bones, many practices. On the hour by the hour, the clowns that were hired by the previous morgue manager, they come out and they have a very horrible show, and then it goes on. It's a zombie nation. It's a zombie institutions. And what keeps this whole thing kind of alive is because there are many older Americans that are retired, they have pensions or they had money from the past. Some of that money still comes in, but is spent on very basic industries. I think that this place is going gradually going back into the politics and economics of a small town that has a small bourgeoisie, a lot of nobodies, and something like that. Even some places they can become agrarian. Well, I go to IVC and on the way to the college, there is some farmlands. The farmland is right next to the college itself. There's just 2-3 farms, and they produce strawberries and stuff, and they sell it in the stand. Well, now the stands have grown. They have become like a little store. You go in and buy the open farmers market or a farmers market. So these are like trends that societies follow when they have gone through their zenith, their growth, and and then they collapse, and all this stuff remains. Nobody knows what to do with dead mall or a dead office building. There is no more Microsoft that lives there, or there are some smaller shops come in. Well, in our building, which I'm moving out, the landlord has divided the building into 2 parts. One part is he has given it to some professional companies that have remained. Like there's a couple of lawyers and there's a couple of car companies, and he maintains that part of the building in really good shape. Then the other part of the building, which I am in, and I am trying to get out, then he rent to anybody. And then there is the class that belligerent class that's coming out is like violent offenders, violent drug addicts. Well, I think this part has become the dispensary or a storage, and then there is some characters. I see some women, I think they are addicts. They come in, they rent the place for a little bit, and then they go out. I think they have their own houses elsewhere. They come and use parts of the building, and then just for legal convenience, and then they skip out and go, and then. But the building itself is becoming more and more empty because there isn't those companies that built this building. They don't need it anymore. Now it's just it's waiting for anybody to use the building or come and. I got into trouble with them, and I'm actually suing them, because I had to move all the stuff that's going on here. But I went across the street and I was looking at another company, another building, and the guy said, "Hey, I have all these rooms." And I went and looked at it. Inside the company. He had 3 rooms. They were all empty. Lately, I go different buildings and I go to rent one room, and I see that the landlord has several rooms that are all empty. But then I didn't want to rent the room because there's too many gays in our building. I don't know what's going on across the other building, and I don't want to be pursued. I'm not putting money into buildings that there might be problems later on. Well, lately, what I'm doing, and I think this will catch on with other people, is that any company that is aggressive like there is belligerent gays, or there is drugs use in there, or there's any kind of violence, or if the police shows up in that building, I just stop giving them money and using them. And there is many buildings, many places that I could go. I usually go and check very thoroughly, make sure that none of this stuff is going on. It's just is like, I think in economic terms, is like the kiss of death, when the least favored customer doesn't want you anymore. Least desirable retail buyer does not want the company anymore. And I think that really shows the death of that company. And I think that these places will remain like a cemetery of kind of buildings, and then who knows, 20-30 years somebody will come in and do something else, or society has changed drastically. Well, another thing that I think is the cause for many office buildings and many malls dying out is that in the 60s or even 70s, there wasn't any internet, there wasn't any electronic communications, email, or web merchandising like eBay. And if you wanted to buy a pair of pants, you'd have to go into a store and physically look at the different pants and even try them. Then, when all these systems came in, I think there is a better use of the space or resources or capital, because a company, say somebody that's importer of pants, Italian pants, they don't really have to pay for retail space or office space to manage or present their product. They could just simply have a warehouse and a small showroom and a few warehouse workers and few office workers, and they could really service the whole United States. They just put up a virtual web hosting or web store and sell the pants, sell the gizmos. This is really a better use of capital, of money. And in fact, I think that the profit margins of many companies have improved, and also the cut they get is smaller, because they have to compete in a virtual world that's connected to everywhere, so they have to give the best price to customer, and the customer is getting most of the benefit. I get the stuff from eBay, they are even clothes, very nice clothes, that I would have to pay 3 times as much in Walmart. Well, there is some industry that I don't think will fold. I go into Goodwill and I buy these nice dress jackets. Oh, I don't want the pants, because sometimes I want the pants, but the pants I can get much better quality online. But the jackets, there is a lot of companies that have gone under, or they get the jackets from families and for nothing, and they sell it to me. The jackets usually $20. They're very nice, and I was wearing one to my class, the law class, and I look very nice in them. Well, I think some industries, some retail industries that are like that, they won't go out of business, or they might even thrive. But I think that when these centralized societies, they fall apart, or the centralized economies, the winner is the people, the little people, because the quality of my life is getting better. I don't have to shell out so much money to get the basics, and also I don't have to compete with very wealthy and very aggressive, sometimes to the point of violence, the people that were here before in the 50s or 60s. I kind of like moving into really small places, really small town, or even staying here because the economy of this place is not the same scale it used to be, and it's great. You can get deals. Well, I think what will follow the next turn of the events is that there are many white male that were very prized in the 50s and 60s. They usually, when I went from many retail stores, I see that everybody that's working 9 to 5, or they're the underdog and they're working their butts off. They're either Spanish or they're Korean or they're Iranian, and there's just this one guy. He's the white, but every time I saw one of these characters, I knew that he's the manager. This was the hierarchy back then, but then now, because the scale of retailing, the kind of economy we have here, it cannot really afford these characters and their antiques. They kind of gradually wash them out. I think that there are some like homeless areas that are forming in different parts. I think they're gonna gradually be washed out into outside of the cities, of big cities like this, into like FEMA camps or places like that. And many of them, they have very expensive habits, and they feel that they should be on the top of the food chain no matter what. But hey, if this place cannot support it financially, and people, they won't pay for it, then gradually this big fish has to go elsewhere. I think this society is going back into a more subdued, even like an agrarian society. It's only good, and agrarian societies were much less violent, much less dedicated to drugs and extravaganzas, all that. Well, these are kind of like some look at the past. In Iran, there is a lot of remnants of older empires and the stuff they had done. You come across. Well, I went to Istanbul to see my brother, and you go in the city, and everywhere you see, like, there is this king had dug a water well, and there you see inscriptions, that this was a king Tahmasib of this clan, and he made this water well. There's a building, and there's the steps goes down, and the women come in and get the. It was a big deal to have a water well. And the king had sponsored this. It's just like the dead malls that we have. It was they were very important at some point, and now you come across them. I don't know what to do with this. Well, thank you very much for putting up with me and listening to my rant. Please subscribe and leave your comment.